Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I hope you're having a good Tuesday. I've been for a walk this morning, and I did a walk yesterday. I got soaked yesterday. I was absolutely drowned, but I'm trying to do a little bit more exercise. So I went for a walk today. Because I haven't exercised for a bit. I mean, I've exercised all my life, but I'm feeling it this morning after walking today. So I hope you're all well. What have you all been up to? Have you been doing anything during the weekend? Have you got anything planned for the bank holiday? I can't believe it's bank holiday next weekend, or this weekend coming, however you look at it. I just can't believe it's another bank holiday. The time has just flown by. It really has flown by. So today, after my walk, I feel a bit shattered, I have to admit. So I thought, for my YouTube video this time, again, I'm going to create just a simple card. Sometimes if you're not feeling like you want to just grab out hundreds of products and use lots of things, and I'm feeling a bit like that today, just want something a little bit simple. And we don't always want to create something that's got millions of layers, or it's a mixed media project. Sometimes we want to create something simple. And I want to do a video because I enjoy doing my videos, but this time it's going to be something simple. So I've got my 4.5 inches by 6.5 inch piece of card, because these are the size cards I like. I know everybody likes different sizes. So if yours are square, or you prefer the long thin ones, then obviously you can adapt accordingly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stand up and I'm just going to place some low tack tape. This is Scotch removable tape that I'm just applying around the edges, just to give me a bit of a border. So I'm just applying that around there. Just gives me a bit of a border. Just making sure that's level, which is actually the hardest bit. And I have to try and not look through the camera, because then that makes me go all ski-whiffed. So this will give me a little bit of a border. Some of the colour may run underneath the low tack tape because I'm going to use moisture, but that's fine as long as I've got a suggestion of a border. And what I'm doing is I'm using the AALLandCreate A6 acrylic block. Now you can use any acrylic block that you've got, so it works with anything. Doesn't matter what size, doesn't matter if it's A4, whatever. You're just getting it to cover this area. So it doesn't matter if you've got an A4 block, a border block, whatever, as long as it fills that surface area that you've got in the open area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with colours that I already had on my desk, because it makes it far easier, and why not? Because we're going for simple. So we've got shaded lilac, broken china and wilted violet. And I've got a very creaky chair as usual. So what I'm going to do is just grab my water bottle. Just grab that. And I'm going to apply, let's just bring this over here. I'm going to apply my Distress Oxide inks directly over the acrylic block. And I'm just going to grab another shaded lilac Distress Oxide ink, because I think that is a little bit on the dry side. That's a little bit better. So we've got the shaded lilac, and what I'm doing is I'm applying it with a smooshing motion so that I don't have any square lines. And then I'm going to apply the blue. Just apply the broken china as well. And then I'm going to apply a little bit of the wilted violet just to the acrylic block. And just applying some of that in the centre, because where I've applied it around the edges, that's not going to reach the card. So make sure that you've got some in the centre. Let me just explain that. Because the colour I've applied around the edges is not going to touch that centre bit. So you need to make sure you've got the colours in the centre as well. So just a little bit of that wilted violet in the centre. And then what I'm going to do, let's just hold that up. I'm just going to spritz that with water. Just lightly with water. And where you think you've got some straight lines, just give it a little bit of a smoosh with your finger, just if you see a couple of straight lines, or you can do that with a brush, but that's what you're going for. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this down onto my background. Now, the outside area is not going to matter one bit. Some might bleed underneath the low tack tape, but that's absolutely fine. But as you can see here, it's this central area here that I want, because that's going to hit my aperture area. And if I press, you get more of a puddle. If I don't press, you get more of a dotty. So it's entirely up to you if you press a little bit and leave some of the areas so it's not pressed. And I'm just going to leave that like that. And then lifting the acrylic block up is the hardest bit. And you can actually create a second generation print, which we will do. I've got another piece of card just to create a second generation print. Let me make sure that you can see that in there. I'm just going to wipe just some of this up, just so there we go, just so that we don't get in too much of a mess. Just wipe some of that up. So what I've got now is I've got this little bit of ink left here. So let's just add that to our card and create another background. Again, you can press. If you press, you get the more of a puddle. If not, you get more of this dotty effect. So it's entirely up to you what you do. But with it being a second generation print, it's obviously going to be a lot paler, but it's still a good print. I'm just going to give that acrylic block just a little bit of a wipe. You could probably get a third generation print. Just clearing that. So what I'm going to do now is, it's best if you can leave it to rest a little bit on the card. That always works better because you keep the vibrancy of the colour. If you heat that with the heat tool, it sort of pushes it down into the card, and therefore you don't keep the vibrancy. And it seems a shame when you've created that background not to keep the vibrancy of that. So just while that's doing that, we'll grab a scrap of card. I'm actually running out of scraps of card, can you believe it? So just reaching for a scrap of card. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to decide on whether I want a circle. Now, I don't want too big a circle and I don't want too small a circle, so it's probably going to be that one. I cut these out when I cut them with my dies, and I always keep these just in case I want to use them. It's just me. So that would stick out on the edge, yes. So we'll go for this circular one. And what I can do, let's just lift this up off the non-stick craft sheet, just because it's just in the way a little bit. So let's just move it out of the way. So I'm just going to take that circle and I'm just going to cut out that circle. Now obviously, if like me you've got dies, you can just cut it out there, but I'm not going to bring my die cutting machine unless I've got one already cut. I may have one already cut. Yes, I have. I've got one already cut. I just looked then in my little stock, but I just draw around that circle, and you're going to want to know the size of that circle. So the size of the circle is 2 3/4 inches. I like it when I can just reach for things. I was using some glue the other day. I think it was PVA. And it's funny because it's all on my non-stick craft sheet. So I keep peeling it, you know, like you do when you get sunburnt and I keep peeling it, I can't stop it. So I've got my circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Hibiscus stamp set. And I'm actually going to use the Hibiscus. I love this flower stamp set. And I think I like flowers so much, not just because it reminds me of the garden, but also because I find them so usable. I find them so usable every day. And I think that's why I try and develop my range with more flowers, butterflies, collages, sentiments. I think I try to develop that range so that it's an extended library, just because they're so easy to use and they inspire me, because it's not too complicated of an image to use either. So it's very easy to use. So I do love the flowers. So I've got the Hibiscus here. I'm just going to ink that up. Just give that an ink. So I'm just adding a good layer of ink with my Versafine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'm just stamping onto either Pink Frog or the reverse of Centura Pearl. So whichever card you want to use, smooth card. And I always allow that to rest on there. I always keep these fingers on here and just allow that to rest on the card. And because I'm using those acrylic blocks, I can lift the acrylic blocks just to make sure that I get the whole of the image. And we've got a beautiful detailed image there. Just lovely. Love all the detail on that. So I like to get into good habits. So even though I know that should be pretty dry, I still rub over just to make sure that we're not going to smudge that ink and that it's blotted. So I do like to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a fine brush. Let's just grab my paint brushes. I've actually got a fine paintbrush. I'm trying to keep at least one brush that I don't ruin, because I'm terrible at ruining brushes. I really am. Let me see if I've got a little bit of it. So I'm going to do a little bit of colouring with my oxides, and if I need a little bit more colour, then I'll use my polychromos. So I'm just going to spritz with water, and what I'm going to do is pick up with my fine paintbrush, and what I'm going to do is just add a wash of the colour, just like so. And it doesn't matter if you go over the lines, because I'm going to cut this image out anyway. And I just like to add the wash first, and then I can go back and add a little bit more detail with the colour. I just sort of like to get a first layer down initially. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more depth, just with the darker areas of colour, just a little bit more depth down there. And what I can do is, because that's got lots of water on, let's just apply a little bit more of the broken china. Just add my water there. My paintbrush is still reasonably wet, but just so I can pick a bit more of the pigment up, just so that it's a little bit darker, I'm just going to add this just around the edges. And it's nice if you can show that, you know, you don't have to have, hundreds of products just to create some depth to your flower. You can do it with your Distress Oxide inks. Just dragging that out a little bit. And just so that you can see, let me just lift that up. I'm just adding a little bit more depth around here. Just a little bit more where that stamen is. Just a little bit there. Let's just pick a little bit more water up just to add a little bit more of the wash. And it's the same with anything really. Whenever you're colouring, it always works better if you can just add some depth of colour just by adding layers of the colour. And then what I would do is I would normally allow that to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a dry with my heat tool. Just give that a little dry. And of course my heat tool is all knotted up. Just give that a little dry. And I was going to just add a little bit of colour with my pencil crayon, just to give it a little bit more depth. But what I'm going to do instead is just carry on with the Distress Oxide, because I think it's nice to show that you can do these things with as little product as possible. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of water and I'm going to add a little bit more depth just to that flower. You know, you obviously, if you're a professional colourist and you want to add colour just with your flowers, sorry, with your pencils to your flower, you can add a little bit more depth with your pencils. But I'm trying to show that you can still get a reasonable result just with your oxide inks, just so that you realise that you don't have to have gallons of product just to make your sample look good. So just applying a little bit more depth just around the edges of my flower, just to give it a little bit more. Just pick up a little bit of water, and I do find it a little bit easier using a fine brush when I'm doing this kind of thing. I find the fine brush gives me a little bit more control. So let's add a little bit more. And just so that you can see, the depth is building up a little bit more with that Distress Oxide. Again, you want to add your pencil crayons, then that's perfectly fine. And if you use a smooth card that reacts with water, it'll work even better. So the pink frog usually is very good for your water techniques. I think I'm quite happy with that. Let's put that brush somewhere where we don't lose it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut. I did have a pair of scissors because I bought them up from downstairs. Of course, can't find them now, which is standard. So I'm just going to cut that out, and I haven't cut the stem. I haven't coloured the stem. Can I get my words out at the moment? I haven't coloured my stem because I just want to see if I want to leave that white. I want to see what it looks like against my backdrop. So I'm going to see what that looks like. I'm just leaving a tiny bit of a border, just to go around my card. It's entirely up to you if you decide to leave a border or you don't leave a border. I won't leave a border around the pollen. I sort of just vaguely go around the shape of the pollen. So I'm just going around that. And you can also add 2 or 3 layers to your flower, just to make it look a little bit different. And this, while we've been colouring, our background has been drying, which is perfect. And you can see how that's developed when I show you shortly. Just cut that out. There we go. So that's our hibiscus. And if you want, just so that it looks a little bit more coordinated with the background, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of purple to that hibiscus. So just spritzing a little bit of water, and I'm just going to add a little bit of purple just to that hibiscus, just to give it a little bit of a purple tinge as well. So I'm just picking up the water and a little bit of purple, just to give it a tinge of the purple as well, just so it looks a bit more coordinated with the background. So a very little touch. I will lift it up so that you can see that. Just a little tinge of the purple. Just let me lift that up just so you can see. It's got a little tinge of the purple in there, just so that it coordinates a little bit more with the background. Just thinking about it then. So let's bring in our background. And what I like about waiting for it to dry is that you get this like a little cloudy effect with the oxides, so it works quite well. So what we're going to do is we're going to give that a dry, just so that we can work with that a little bit more. Make sure you dry the back as well. You see, what will happen is this tape will come off. I'm going to put this here and my hibiscus will go on the top like this. So it works quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is take my Numerator stamp, which is one of my favourite background stamps. Again, very usable, which is what I love. I love the fact that it's so usable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Wilted Violet Distress Oxide ink, just to give me some little touches of stamping. Just to add, I ink it and then I think, where did I ink? Just to add a little bit of stamping to the background. And I'm not using a permanent ink this time like I do with the Versafine Clairs. I'm going for a softer feel, just so it feels a little bit softer in the background. Just appeals, just to give that softness. So just add a little bit of stamping there. And I can curl my stamp just so that it gives me a bit of more random feel. So the card will go there, this will go here. So what we can do now is add a little bit of stamping here. A little bit of stamping towards the top. and you keep bringing in your circle just so that you can test where you're putting everything. Yes, that works nicely. And then I'm just going to bring a little bit of stamping into that circle. I always wipe my, I don't normally clean my stamps, but I do wipe them when I've used the Distress Oxide inks. The reason I wipe them when I'm using the Distress Oxide inks is if you leave that layer on there, on the stamp, when you come to apply your versafine clay, because the Distress Oxides have got a pigment element to them, it will, the black won't be as punchy, as vibrant, and it won't stand out as much because you've got that layer of oxide on the stamp already. So it's good that you just clean your stamps after the oxides. So what I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of stamping to the background here, and I'm just going to take the other half of the Hibiscus stamp set, and I'm going to add a little bit of stamping here just to the edges, and I'm going to use a little bit of the broken china. So apply my broken china first over the area of the stamp, and then I'm going to use some of that wilted violet because I'm going for a softer look on the card. I don't want it too overpowering, and that's why I'm using the Distress Oxides for the stamping purposes, just because if you look at that, it's much softer than if I stamped with the versafine clay. So I keep putting it back just to see where I want everything to go. So that will go there. I can still see my bit of stamping, so that works quite nicely. And I'll add some shading as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the next layer, the layer that makes things pop. So for me, that's always a touch of black. But I only want to add little touches. So I'm going to take the same stamp set, and what I'm going to do is pick these little bits of alphabet that are on the stamp set. I'm going to pick them up, just little bits of them, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that stamping. So you're not adding much, you're just adding little touches because you're not overpowering everything. So I'm just going for little touches on there. Just so it gives me a little pop of black. And I always think a little pop of black always works, as long as you don't overpower what you're doing. So if I lift that up, you can see that just that little pop of black really does work. But you can see the value of the background when it's all working together. Just make sure my hands are clean. And what I can do is I can remove the low tack tape. And I sort of pull it sort of sideways, even though this tape is usually very good for me and releases quite nicely. I never determine which layer went first and get, you know. So just pull it sort of away from you. Away from you. And then it just works better. You find that you don't have any tears. Just pull that away. There we go. And the nice little border works beautifully. Doesn't that pop when you've got that little bit of a border? And I love how the little bits are missing. Really appeals to me, that does. So what I'm going to do is just add this here, like so. So we can stick that down. And we're going for a nice simple look, a nice fresh look is what we're going for. just place that there, like so. And what you can do is you can use your scrap paper. I'm a great believer in using scrap paper, and just go over those touches of black stamping just to make sure that you've blotted them, especially with stamping on top of that inky background. And what I'm going to do then is just take my Inktense pencil, and I'm just going to go around that circle just to add some shading just around the edge, just so that it pops. I think we need a little bit of water. I don't think there's much water in my water brush. Just blend that out. And you will reactivate the oxide a little bit, because naturally that's reactive to water, but it doesn't move too much, so you're absolutely fine. Just adding a little bit of shading just around the edges. And what I did this time is I'm using my grey Inktense pencil. You can use a pastel pencil or whatever works for you, but I didn't add too much of the pigment, just so it's not too overpowering. This is going to go here, like so. So we'll add that, and we'll add some little bits of black cotton. Let's make sure this is black cotton. I have a really bad habit of picking up the polyester thread, and that's the polyester thread. Trust me, when you try and pull that, it is not, it does, that's the fine, yeah. I'm just checking I've got the right, it doesn't break. The actual other one that I've got doesn't break properly, it nearly breaks my hands. So just apply a little bit of cotton, and I'm just going to bring in, while I just get this cotton, this little bit, this, you remember this second print that we did? Doesn't that look lovely? And you could just have the hibiscus going up here as well. So as a second generation print, that works really well. So I shall keep that as a background. I keep all my backgrounds because then if I want a quick card, the backgrounds are all ready. So just add a little bit of adhesive just underneath the cotton, just so that it grabs, and then we can adhere the hibiscus. Just on the side like so. And I love how I can just see the little bit of stamping just popping below. And there we go. Make sure that's sitting down. Just pop that back. Just going to grab that hibiscus stamp set that says hibiscus. Like so. Just grab that. So just inking up the hibiscus sentiment. I'll just stamp that onto some scrap card. I like that it's nice and fresh. The card's lovely and fresh. I'm getting into a good habit of placing my stamp sets back onto the carrier sheet, which, trust me, is a first. I normally place them down everywhere and then I end up spending half my time looking for them, which isn't good. So just cutting it down a little bit. looks like I've had a night on the tiles. It's so not straight. Now it's up to you if you put the hibiscus. I quite like the hibiscus tucked in here, just so that it's in line, or you can put it here. But I don't want to cover up too much of my background. It does look good there. Oh, I can't make my mind up now. I like it on the edge there. Let me just hold that up. And then I like it here, just going against the edge. No, I like it there. But there's always a couple of ways that you can add them. And you can still see that background. You can still see that it's there. And you can still see the little touches of stamping, which I'll hold up just so you can see. I'm going to add some shading around that hibiscus. But what I like is when you can see little bits of stamping here and just down here and here. They're still visible, those little bits of stamping, little suggestions of stamping. So I'm just going to add some of that shading just around the edges of the sentiment, like so. We'll leave that white edge. We'll just add a little bit more shading just around just to make it pop a little bit more, just so that you can see that. I love that touch of purple on the flower. I think that works really well. Let's add some splatters of white Posca pen, just to give a little bit more vibrancy. And then we're going to add this to our black mat. Chuck my heat tool on the floor because there's never enough space. Just add this to a black mat because that will make it pop a little bit more. Just place the first edge down and then I can place the next edge down, and then if it's not quite in place you can move it a little bit, just because it doesn't grab straight away, but it's only a few seconds and then you can press it down and it does grab. I do want to make sure I work on a clean surface, especially when I'm putting it on a white card blank. So let's just bring in that copier paper just so we make sure. I hope you've all got something nice planned for the bank holiday. I am desperately hoping that I can get to do some gardening. My gardening job, some gardeners were going to come and help me dig out some shrubs in a border. That's been put off. They're supposed to be coming next week as well. So I'm hoping that next week I can get some of that done. Fingers crossed. I've got a busy few weeks ahead. So I'm hoping I can get that done. And what I'm going to do is just grab one card for an insert. Just a little bit for an insert. And what I'm going to do is just grab my packaging from my stamp. The packaging from the stamp will be fine. And I'm just going to add a little bit of broken china and a little bit of wilted violet just to my acetate from the stamp set. Just give it a little bit of a spritz, and then I'm just going to add that to the corner here on the inside of my card. I don't really want to add too much because it's a mere suggestion. That's perfect. It's a suggestion of what's on the front cover. I'll just give that a wipe. And I'm going to have to give that a dry, or else we'll be waiting forever. So just mop some of the thickness up because it's just a little subtle touch. Just to go on the insert. Give that a dry. And then turn it over to give it a dry on the other side. And you could add the hibiscus on the inside if you wished. But what I'm going to do is just add a little suggestion of some of the stamping that's on the front cover. And what I'm going to do is use this little bit from the hibiscus stamp set, and I'm going to use the Wilted Violet Distress Oxide ink and just add a little touch of stamping just to the inside, just to give it that suggestion. And let's just give that stamp set a wipe. Just give that a dry. Dry it from the other side. There we go. And I'm going to add this to the inside of my card, just so that it gives it a suggestion of what's on the front cover. It just looks nicely finished then. Place this on the inside. Bring that down a little bit. So you've then got your front cover of your card, just so you can see that, and you can see the stamping on the circle, just like a suggestion of it, which works really well. And then if you open it up, you've got a little bit of an insert as well. So a nice simple card to create, but it looks effective as well. I do like the touches of purple on the hibiscus. That works really well. So I hope you've enjoyed that demo. I hope you'll share your makes with me. And while I've got a few seconds, I'll just show a little workshop that I've done. I've done a pre-recorded workshop, workshop 48, which is all squared up, and it's this little book that we create. The workshop is £15 and it's called All Squared Up. And if you email me, then I can give you the details. But just so I can show you, it's a little book that we create in the pre-recorded workshop. And this is why the colours were on my desk, because we created this piece. Just so you can see that. And just turn that page. So it's a lovely little, sweet little book. And it's called All Squared Up. And it's a pre-recorded workshop. And if you want to join me, it's in a private Facebook group. And if you email me, I can give you all the details. So I hope you've got something good planned for the week. I can't believe it, the sun's actually come out because I'm not walking. When I walk, it's either freezing and blowing a gale, but the sun's actually come out now. So you never know, cross fingers, I might actually get some time in the garden. So I hope you get some time just for you, and that you have some relaxed time just for you. I hope you have a lovely week, and I shall see you all soon. Bye for now.